So in terms of outlook, what do we see? So I think maybe two observation points to focus on, last year and this year. So last year, I would say 2003 and 2004. So in 2003, we had an estimated growth of 0.7, real growth. And in 2024, when we were concluding the Article 4, we were anticipating a little bit of a rebound. But after the end of our mission, which was in November, so upcoming data, and in particular the revision of output in the agricultural sector, push us to revise our forecast. So what we had for 2024 is 0.8% growth, which is, a slight improvement compared to the year before, but you can see that still it means that up to last year, growth in South Africa has been below 1% for too long. What we are projecting now for next year or for this year is 1.5. So clear improvement on the backdrop of improved electricity generation. So clearly you can see that, load shedding is mostly over as of now. We also have some increase in consumption due to the two-pot system and many more. So some improvement in growth that we foresee. And over the medium term, continuous improvement up to 1.8%. What is important is really to emphasize that those projections took place as of end of last year. And clearly in the first 6 weeks of this year, we will see, in particularly the last 4 weeks, so some increased risk, particularly on the external front. So geo-economic fragmentation or the intensification of protectionist policy is something that is likely to impact not only South Africa, but is likely to impact the global growth and of course emerging markets such as South Africa. So we still need to see what exactly these policies will be to be able to adjust our growth forecast as need be. So there is no clear indication yet, but I will say that as need be. So that is a clear, important downside risk that we see to the outlook. On the domestic front, there are also downside risks that we see, but which can actually transform in a way into upside risk, which is the non-implementation of structural policies or fiscal reform, or a delay in the implementation. When I say that this downside risk can be an upside, is that if, for instance, there is a reaction in South Africa in terms of expediting the speed or the pace of structural reform, so that could actually turn things around or potentially turn things around.
So the consequences of very tight expenditure containment for over a decade, which has intensified after COVID, can now be felt in every major government service. I'm sure you can feel it in SEF, right? But you can see it in defense. You can see it in education. We've just passed a law called the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, which universalizes grade R tuition, which everybody agrees is a good thing. It's unfunded. It's not funded, right? Learner-educator ratios are rising, right? Healthcare, you can see it, I won't go into it. Criminal justice, there was a piece in the paper showing some of the conditions in courts the other day. And local government, you can see, and I'm not saying that there isn't corruption or mismanagement or waste and that those things are not important, but I'm saying you can see the resource squeeze contributing to eroding government capabilities. And the policy baseline that we have now will worsen that over time. Also, Treasury is taking this lawnmower approach where cuts are across the board. Not only are they across the board, they're targeted at inputs rather than outputs. So nobody is asking, should we cut this program or that program? They're just saying, let's cut salaries. What is salaries? It's an input, right? So the consequence of doing that is avoiding the reality that when you cut salaries across the board, you are targeting basic education, healthcare, and criminal justice, because those are labor-intensive activities by definition. So there are some expenditure reviews that have identified several policy efficiencies. that would give you an alternative to this lawnmower approach, but they have failed to generate new fiscal space. The IMF has spoken to state-owned companies, procurement, public wages, right? State-owned companies, to me, is yes, if we had well-run state-owned companies, they wouldn't be demanding stuff from the fiscus, it's true. But once you get into it, this is all about Eskom and Transnet. The others are tiny. This is all about Eskom and Transnet. Now, in my view, given the tariff path that has just been announced, given the accumulating debt to local government, the fiscus is going to have to put more money into Eskom to just sustain Eskom as it currently is now. And if you try to, the thing about structural reform is that if structural reform is worth its salt, it will disrupt entrenched incumbent interests. That's what it's about. Now, to disrupt entrenched incumbent interests while at the same time reducing the resource envelope is not an easy thing to do. It's much easier to disrupt people when you have money to pay them off, right? But if you're squeezing the Eskom staff, retrenching them, lowering their salaries, and also trying to restructure the organization, it's possible to be done. Maybe that's what Elon Musk's approach is. But I don't think we should attempt it here. So the alternative to target, so okay, on the wage bill, it just doesn't make any sense to me that anyone would say that public service wages should be kept permanently to increase at CPI or below CPI. I don't understand how any economist can advocate for such a position, because there is one labor market, right? And this labor market, about 30%, let's say, of the employment in this labor market is government, and the other 70% is private sector, right? And there's no wage control in the private sector, and the wages in the private sector are increasing far above CPI. At CPI plus 2, at CPI plus 3 on average. If you go to the top of the income distribution, they're growing even faster, right? At horrible speeds that Ingrid Woolard has exposed. And yet, in the whole of government, it must be kept below. So what you're asking for is somehow a sustained erosion of the human capital base of the public sector, right? That's what the consequence will be. And so it feeds into this reduction. So to me, salary increases have been kept below CPI for 5 years, significantly below CPI for the last 5 years. Good, it's reduced the wage bill. I doubt whether you can maintain that permanently. At some point, you're going to have to give public servants an inflation-related increase. And indeed, that is what has happened with the latest negotiations, which point to exactly that. So in conclusion, I mean, the alternative to the lawnmower approach is undertaking politically difficult reforms. And that's what's involved in structural reform. It's about saying, are we going to play a regional security role as South Africa? And saying, unfortunately, we cannot afford to do so. Let's reduce the size of the defense force and withdraw from these engagements. If you're not prepared to do that, then simply saying the budget is going to be lower is asking for there to be dysfunction, such as we've seen in DRC Congo in the recent weeks.